Hello, everybody. I'm very, very happy to greet you all. I saw 2 hours ago that you are from 71 countries, so in the meantime, probably from more, and that we have today more than 300 people listening and participating to this great event of Alliance of Management Development Association in Rising Economies. We did it in partnership with PRIME, Principles of Responsible Management Education, and we invited the head of PRIME, Professor Mette Morsing, and we shall not be on professors, but just we are colleagues and friends. So Mette, who is a big expert, person with a great impact, a person who can do a lot in the world for better management education, for reimagining management education. And so we were very happy thinking which event CEEMAN would contribute to Alliance. We decided that we do this event on reimagining management education in rising economies, and that we do it in partnership with UN Prime. So you see that we have some other terribly interesting guest speakers today. We have Jikyeong. I'm very sorry. I was just learning how to pronounce her name, Jikyeong Kang, Prime Board Member, President and Dean of Asian Institute of Management in Philippines. And we have with us Therese Norlander, Sustainability Director, Europe, the Coca-Cola Company, Netherlands. And we have Arnold Smith, the head of PG Deep in Leadership Development, an Associate Professor of Business and Society, University of Stellenbosch Business School, South Africa. So these are the people that will be sharing their knowledge and experience with you all. My name is Danica. I'm Danica Purg. I am president of IDC Bled School of Management, and I am president of CEEMAN, and also for the next 2 years, president of the Alliance. I feel the need and the obligation to say some words about what do we mean by Alliance and what do we mean by rising economies, etc. And afterwards, we shall be each about 6-7 minutes talking. I mean, I shall take my time now, and later I shall be careful that I'm not too active anymore, but keep our great guest speakers talking. And then we have, so 1 hour, it's for us, for discussion among us, for presentations. And then we have 20 minutes for the voices from the public. So you have there the chat. So we are expecting to get this, the questions from you. Mette Morsing will manage this, handle this questions and question and answer session. And she knows what we are going to talk, etc. And she will be listening to all that. And she's the most competent, I believe, among us to handle this. And then we shall have the concluding words from both of us, where also I expect Mette to have the main. I am introducing and she is concluding. That is how we imagine. And if I may say still something more or less personally and privately, I saw, I was looking through the list of participants, and I saw so many old friends of mine, some former professors from our school, people from all over, the friends that I didn't meet for years. So I would like to give you two a special kind regards from Bled. Here we are in our studio, and let us start with the session. What is the Alliance? We established Alliance in 2019 at the CEEMAN annual conference together with 6 other associations. Association of African Business Schools, ANGRAD, Association of Undergraduate Schools in Brazil, Baltic Management Development Association, BMDA, CLADEA in Latin America, Forum in Poland, and RABE, Russian Association of Business Education in Russia. We did it because we want to together, together you are stronger. You can give bigger support to management schools from Rising Economies, which share similar values, challenges, and often have great innovative solutions to offer to the world, especially in the area of sustainability. There is a great interest from our regions to have stronger collaboration, it's regions, countries, continents, and to have stronger collaboration in the area of research, experience exchange, joint events, and accreditation to further build on individual strengths and benefits of all partner associations and especially their members. Some data about. The Alliance brings together about 1,300 universities. So that's a big number. These are the registered schools by the associations. So 1,300 universities and business schools, while we estimate that altogether there are about 15,000 business schools in rising economies. More than 3,000 come from Latin America, in which some 1,500 are in Brazil and 1,000 in Mexico, 5,500 in India, 500 in China, I was checking this morning, and half of them have the MBA studies also, and the other half are more on other types of training and development. Then about 700 in Africa, estimate from total of 1,300 universities, and about 1,500 in Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia together. I'm very happy we have from Central Asia today Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, which we hope with Kazakhstan we work for many years together, from the beginning in fact, but we would like also to connect better in the future with Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan and other countries that are ending on stan. So management schools in rising economies have a tremendous and impossible task. I would like now to say something about how I see the situation in our part of the world. The dominating values amongst managers and citizens too, in general, are the aims and norms of neoliberalism. The dream is to become rich after coming from a poor environment and having a poor childhood. These values are spread also by many educators around the world. The impact of initiatives, for example, in China, to promote social responsibility hasn't a big impact on the mindset of managers and business leaders. People in rising economies see how leaders are getting rich themselves. It is almost an impossible task of business schools to challenge the culture of bribing, corruption, and nepotism as it is spread amongst the ones who are responsible also by law to defend business ethics. In my view, the authority of the United Nations as well as PRIME have a positive impact and help business schools to promote sustainability and social responsibility and a better life in general. It is important that business schools in rising economies are becoming more self-confident. This is another reason that I was really for years thinking we should come together, because we need more self-confidence. And I was thinking and almost sure that we shall get it and have it and make it out of us, out of our actions. There are still too much the people in the rising economies impressed by the United States, British and Western European passports. They are still copying the Harvard model. They still believe the accreditation schemes from USA and Western Europe are better than their own ones. Of course, The policies of international ranking systems basing their relationship almost exclusively on the US and European accreditation institutions does not help. Also, the values and behavior of political and business partners from developed environment are essential, and developed in the inverted commas, environment are essential to promote a change of mindset in rising economies. I know a good example of a bank from Netherlands that gives loans to Brazilian farmers under the condition that they operate sustainably or are ready to support the banks that become sustainable. We also know the activities of Global Alliance for Banking on Values. There are 66 banks, having 70 million customers, having the capital of $200 billion, and they are also promoting the ideas of ethics in banking, making banking more transparent, etc. They were established in 2009 in Switzerland. So it is also, something that is happening and growing, and we have to learn and share, let them share their experience with us and with other banks, etc. We were helping in our school to the banks in Slovenia to get in touch with them and so on. It seems that environment could be the catalytic issue to come to an integrative or holistic understanding of the relevant elements such as climate, health, sustainability, and social responsibility. It is important that business schools clarify in education and research the importance of these relations. It is important also that business schools succeed to contribute to a changed meaning of the economic term growth by introducing next to or instead of quantitative factors, also the qualitative ones related to the elements I mentioned before. When we think about growth, we have to have also quality of life and quality and the values, etc. in mind, not only how to become bigger and greater in another way of thinking. It is important that initiative in rising economies such as IMTA, International Management Teachers Academy, that we have in Bled, organized by CEEMAN every year, get support to develop business schools teachers and researchers of rising economies who are able to teach along the lines and from the approach I described before. The manifesto released, the document released by CEEMAN in 2018 calls for action to redefine global management education. What is CEEMAN manifesto? It is re-establishing relevance alongside excellence as the way forward. We believe that excellence is important, but we also think that relevance is important. The aim is to equally value excellent teaching and research that is relevant to management practice, relevant to the needs of participants in the markets that individual institutions serves, and act dynamically. This is very important, the speed, the agility. And finally, new times need new business schools. And new business schools need new educators and researchers. New educators need additional communication skills in order to be effective at online and blended courses, which is now something last half a year, very important for us all. And we have really to train and to develop faculty and all the stuff concerning that to make it also great. I say often, we are in our school trying to bring high touch through high tech to the participants. And I discovered by myself that this is possible. But of course, you have to make a big effort and you have to reimagining and you have to reinvent yourself and of course the methods of teaching, etc. So also the content has to become different, even more important. It is not enough to go through the leadership program for instance, but to go through the transformation in any type of management education. Here I would conclude my speech almost, I would say. It was, I hope that I gave a little, really little introduction, as I meant, for others who will now continue after me and who will talk about changing mindset, who will talk about what do we mean by reimagining. So I imagine everybody of the speakers now to elaborate on these topics further, what I started and what I initiated. And so I would like now to invite Mette Morsing, head of PRIME. She comes from Denmark originally, now she's in USA. And she will talk about the efforts of PRIME in changing management education. What do business schools need to do differently, and why does it not happen already? What is hindering us? About that, we shall listen now to Mette. Thank you very much. Floor is yours, Mette.
Thank you very much, Danica Purg. Thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for inviting me today. It is a true honor to be speaking here today at the Alliance of Management Leadership Associations in the Rising Economies. Before May last year, I was a professor, like many of you, at Stockholm School of Economics, and before that at Copenhagen Business School. I was also the executive director of two of the largest management research centers in Europe on sustainable development. But then I was invited by 1st of May 2020 to step up as the head of PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education, by the UN Global Compact. And it is the United Nations' largest movement on responsible management education. And today I'm very happy to be here with so many good friends and long-term supporters of PRIME and a true global team here today. So thank you very much for inviting me. PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education, is a global movement of more than 860 signatory business schools in more than 95 countries. And I'm very happy to say that even during an extraordinarily difficult year, like last year, 2020, more than 50 new schools from all across the globe decided to commit to the PRIME principles for responsible management. And we actually today, I just asked my team recently to make a little sort of estimate of how many students do we actually ideally have an access to via our network. And it is about 3 million students that are on an ongoing basis enrolled in our business schools across the world, and nearly 200,000 faculty. So there is a huge potential. I think it's fair to say there's also a lot we can still do out there, and that's why I'm saying potential. And this is back to the question of why is progress relatively slow? Because a lot of wonderful things are happening, but we could do so much more. And this is the exciting journey as business schools, as management and leadership associations, we are on here together. It is exciting and it is a much needed journey. It is very clear that the planet and its people are most urgently calling for great leaders to navigate towards a better future. We need leaders of all business organizations to help the world to a better state. And we need local leaders as well as global leaders who are driven by a sense of purpose and who are committed to a cause that is bigger than their own self-interest. We need responsible leaders who can connect with the people and the environment around them. Most basically, I think it's fair to say that we need leaders who understand that their job is to be at the service of others. We need the leaders of the world to start asking, what can my business do for the world? Instead of the mantra that has permeated business schools over the last 40 years, dominated by a question that was very different, which was more like, what can the world do for my business? So we need to change, and we need to make that twist into the training and mindset of the students in our educational systems. This may not sound like a big change, but in fact, it requires a transformation of the way we think, the way we teach, and the way we research business models and how to do business at business schools. In his now classic reading, Professor Ghoshal back in 2005 argued that bad management theories destroy good management practices. And what he said to us was that we teach the wrong mindset. We encourage what he referred to a me-first attitude, where we teach our students that success is getting the highest salary in the shortest period of time for yourself, and the highest short-term profit for your shareholders, your business, the owners. It is, like Danica Purg said so well in her initial note here, a neoliberal dream of being rich, as if it was the end goal in itself, and the goal itself of our professional careers. So what do we need to do as business schools? We as business schools need to change the way we educate current and future business leaders. And for PRIME, a primary ambition is to inspire a global movement of business schools and universities across the world to education of the next generation of leaders to actually take care of the planet, not just for themselves, but also for the next generations. To develop systems thinking, to understand that we are facing right now global challenges that we have not seen before, and to which there are no quick fix or easy solutions. These challenges we cannot handle alone, and certainly not in a short-term me-first attitude. We need to work together. We need to develop new business models that are sustainable for the long term, and to make business innovations that can that can regenerate, recycle, and reuse materials. So we leave the air a little bit cleaner, the soil a little bit less polluted, the oceans a little bit less dirty, and that the way we treat each other is a little more inclusive, respectful, and dignified. We need our students to understand that the good life, the happy life, also the professional life, is more than a high salary. As Paul Polman, former CEO of Unilever, and also now the vice chair of the United Nations Global Compact, and also I'm happy to say on the PRIME board with us, with him, he has said, and with him many other business leaders have said, that business schools have put performance over purpose. So we think more about performance than we think about purpose. We need to redefine and educate leaders to think about success as the moment where a leader has focused his or her skills and resources and his or her business with the purpose of making a positive impact in the world. Of course, this does not mean that businesses should not make a profit and should not have a solid and robust economy. But it simply means that purpose must be back in the business driver's seat. In other words, the world needs purpose-driven leadership. Some of you have seen the World Economic Forum's report from October last year, and it was interestingly focusing a lot on lifelong learning. And it was also, for me at least, an interesting read to see the skills that is anticipated to be the crucial skills for businesses into the future. And some of the skills that were highlighted were analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, the ability to go into complex problem solving, creativity, originality and initiative, social influence, and of course, technology, design and programming. I think it is interesting that these skills that are highlighted here are not only sort of the technical skills that we usually think of that our business schools students should engage in. These are very, very different and very social skills. So to conclude my initial talk here, I think it's important that we look upon how we can, as business school and with PRIME as a business, an alliance, you could call it, in a way, sort of instigating, inspiring a new mindset among investors, a new mindset among consumers, a new mindset among the workforce, and not least our managers in the future. And it requires a mindset that acknowledges that at the end of the day, we are all in this together. A bit like we have experienced during the pandemic, We need to help each other. We need to protect each other. We need to collaborate more than compete across borders to develop new innovative ways of helping the world to advance, and hereby ourselves, of course. If you work in splendid isolation, you are likely to be too little and too late, as some say. Some of our good colleagues, Robert Strand and Ed Freeman, have suggested the concept of cooperative advantage as a response to what we have taught for many years at our business school, namely the competitive advantage. And cooperative advantage means that we are all better off if we engage in systems thinking, accelerating collaborative efforts to support each other and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mette. A great discussion and great presentation. And now I would like to invite Jikyeong Kang to make her presentation. She will be talking. She is a Prime Board Member, President and Dean of Asian Institute of Management from Philippines. She is now sitting in the office in UK because she could not return to her country. A very impressive lady whom we see also as a vice chair of ASCSB and EFMD, and having all kind of fantastic awards for teaching and excellency in her field. And she will talk about what do we mean by reimagining management education and what are the necessary steps to make it happen concerning skills, competences, and experiences. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danica. So I'm going to start a little bit broadly and then narrow it down to management education, in particular, focusing on management education in rising economies. So there's no doubt that we are living in an era of tremendous and fast changes. Furthermore, I'm sure you will all agree that the changes are quite mutational in nature, affecting economies, businesses, and societies. The changes are manifest in several ways, and many experts would also agree that VUCA and allied developments are at the core of this. And of course, I don't need to mention how the coronavirus pandemic has changed our world permanently. These have upended the conventional know-how, processes, systems, and jobs. And yes, there are job losses at various levels, there's no doubt about it. But across the board, in almost every industry and domain, there is a skill deficit as well. And furthermore, even as many skills are becoming irrelevant or redundant, new competencies and skills are also emerging. So now let's look at business education in particular. I'm sure most of you would agree that a legacy business education imparted through brick and mortar business schools is being disrupted at almost all levels, and especially with the pandemic. Here are just the 4 of these major disruptors that will significantly affect our sector. Emerging edtech innovations will continue to disrupt higher education institutions, especially business schools. They can make management education more accessible, more personalized, and furthermore, automated and assisted learning can bring immense a learning experience to the learners much more efficiently, effectively. Artificial intelligence will start filling gaps in learning and teaching. Algorithms will be assuming the role of mentors. Emergence of new collar jobs promotes hiring from alternative channels. I'm sure you all heard the likes of IBM, Google, Amazon, Deloitte. They are no longer requiring degrees for some white-collar jobs. Over 2 decades ago, in his bestseller, Only the Paranoid Survive, Andrew Grove, the legendary CEO of Intel Corporation, coined the term strategic inflection point, a time in the life of business when its fundamentals change. Business education is at a strategic inflection point. Its landscape is being swept by torrents of transformative market currents, presenting both threats and opportunities. Schools and institutions that are resilient, that strategize to rise and pivot again to meet the emerging challenges will succeed, others will perish. All these changes mean that now is the time to innovate, now or never. One immediate priority business schools should recalibrate, it can be described as a critical 3R, namely relevance, reach, and respect. Business schools in general and MBAs in particular are being challenged for relevance. The only way to recalibrate relevance is by integrating curricula and research with the practical demands of the employers. As I pointed out earlier, EdTech disruptors in higher education in general and business education in particular are outsmarting legacy business education on access as well as affordability. This is what I refer to as a reach. Unfortunately, very few business schools have recognized these fast, disruptive changes that are taking place. Business schools, especially some of the top global elite schools, have had a certain arrogance of originality, of excellence, of achievements, etc. Many business schools still operate in a producers or suppliers mentality without respecting all the relevant stakeholders. So I believe it is high time respect is established. It is high time business schools regard students and their potential employees as unique partners. So to successfully adapt to these disruptive forces, business schools should make robust strategic choices. The choices will inform how we should change in terms of our customer segments, product offerings, channels, alliances or partnerships, pricing, as well as what kind of professors we want to have at our own institutions. That leads me to my next but connected point. Legacy business schools will have to innovate. I think the word innovate has been mentioned several times already with our two previous speakers. We should differentiate along the dimensions not easily replicated online or by other schools. We should innovate classroom experience and make on-campus learning irreplaceable. We should offer both online and classroom learning according to the needs of the students. We should seek more extensive collaboration between faculty and businesses. Business schools should help from imparting skills to enhancing learning. Conventionally, business schools professors teach in a classroom, case room, lecture theater. But with the MOOC, the task of imparting skills is taken over by courseware, as we all know. It makes no sense, or only very little sense, for the business professor of current times to go and teach. Classroom is no longer just a place to transfer content. Classrooms of today are meant for in-person discussions, debates. Our professors can be a facilitator, discussant, mentor, or even a coach. Delivering future-proof business education therefore requires focusing on core vitals. I've identified 6 of those core vitals. Wicked problem as a starting point, VUCA, Industry 4.0, digitalization, all of these things means that some of the ways that we teach our functional areas have become redundant. We need to recognize that one of the must-have skills of today's managers is data-related, data competencies. It will not be enough if all our students do is to analyze hundreds of cases as part of their MBA. They should be able to immerse themselves in hands-on work. Management education will have to appreciate more so the significant role humanities and liberal arts play. Lastly, in this AI-triggered world, technology-enabled learning pathways are imperative. We need to go beyond omni-channel. We need to go omni-choice for our students and learners. Now, that is something that I feel very strongly and passionate about, and that is business schools that do not adopt lifelong learning. Mette mentioned this earlier. As a new mantra will fade away. There should be a greater, much greater focus on lifelong learning, with the schools ensuring personalized study experiences. We need to think about flexible learning approaches and digital innovation. And schools really need to think about how we cater to learners at all career stages, not just at the beginning or mid-career. The rising economies in 3 continents, Asia, Africa, Latin America, they have a stark differences compared to the developed North. And I don't think I need to elaborate on what they are: geopolitical situations, economic uncertainties, social dynamics. How about the cultural nuances? We need to really acknowledge that there are many indigenous, traditional, local methods of doing things. And all these realities, notwithstanding, business education in the rising economies have largely followed an import and impart model. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that model, and there's absolutely no need to reinvent the wheel. But it is important for business schools in rising economies to produce more knowledge based on local scenarios. And in my view, business schools have not done enough, barring a very few exceptions. In other words, the value of education in rising economies depends on the cultural and contextual intelligence, and business schools should do more to document and disseminate local knowledge in a variety of themes. And again, there are many good examples coming from Latin America, Africa, and of course, Asia. So lastly, I personally believe sustainability should emerge as a core theme in business education in general, but in particular in rising economies. Naturally, it is so good to see that finally inequality, climate change, and impact of new technologies have made policymakers, media, and public to question whether business school is serving societal goals. Business schools should educate who will appreciate their role in society and critically evaluate how businesses can foster inclusive innovation and growth. In sum, business schools should also focus on training graduates who will create positive value for a variety of stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I'm so happy I recognized many great ideas which you are so nicely elaborated. You know, from, I mean, I really agree with almost everything, and you develop further this, how management schools in rising economies should really, you said, have local scenarios, work on local scenarios that we are seeing all the time, what I mentioned already. And by that, I don't want to criticize nobody in USA or in Western Europe, but it's so difficult to you know, to bring people in also in management education in their own place, and to think and to be proud of that and to develop their own ideas further. So I'm happy that still somebody else far away from here is thinking like that. And now we have to, so thank you very much again. And now we have Therese Norlander, Sustainability Director Europe from Coca-Cola Company, the Netherlands. She suggested by herself, I said to her, why don't you talk about something about industry, what the industry expects from the business schools and what the business schools should then offer, you know, and because I know she's doing a lot of that, including students in their work and so on, you know. But she then suggested that she would like to talk about how the inclusivity in thinking will help to solve the problems of the future. So Therese, yeah, I know you have a great experience in different fields. You are also working in health, in NGOs, and in all kinds of different companies, last 3 years in Coca-Cola, so, and in sustainability especially. You are a highly respected person in Coca-Cola. I know this, and in this field. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Danica, and hello to all of you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited and humbled to speak in your midst. So I look forward to sharing some time. And as the previous speaker spoke a little bit about inclusivity and the social element, I would really like to double down on that. Because if you think about environmental issues and sustainability as it has been addressed, it is also really about the social component in that. In the financial world, and even more in the sustainability world, we talk about ESG, so environmental, social, and governance. And I would really like to talk about the social element, because my key point here is that in management education, you need inclusive thinking. This means from a team variety perspective to have a model that really includes participation from everybody and includes the perspective of all the people and the target audience that you want to reach. Inclusive thinking at its core is the act of considering all the information about a specific action or topic before making a decision about it. Specifically within some of our most recent movements, like for example, Black Lives Matter, we have seen that inclusive thinking should be much more on the forefront, also for companies like us, but also, I guess, for management education institutes like yourselves. It can really help us to take more things into account, to really support the change that needs to happen, have a wider scope, and at its purest, really include and reckon everything. Now, why is that really relevant, and especially when you look at the future of management education and the way we as a business, so Coca-Cola, look at that? Well, I believe that inclusive thinking can really help stop chaos and social injustices in a world, because everyone, with all the differences in race and class and gender, it needs to be given consideration. And this is relevant if you want to educate and help develop future leaders. It is not a given these days, unfortunately. All managers, not only the future ones, also really the current managers in position, must be trained, supported, and reminded of how to bring inclusive thinking into practice. And this might mean the education as such needs to adapt too. So this is my plea to you. Are there methods and models that are used to really support inclusive thinking already? And are you applying those? How are these models really already part of your curriculum? Building a way of thinking and working into education and management where it is about putting yourself in the shoes of others, so he or she can really understand the world better and moreover create good rapport with the people around you. This really links into what Mette also talked about, putting purpose into the driving seat. This can mean a different approach to, for example, stakeholder approach that managers are being trained, or professionals in marketing usually take, or communication or sustainability specialists. It needs a different approach. But basically, it needs a different approach to all leaders, whether you're in finance or logistics or sales, it doesn't matter. It will influence the future success of any leader and any organization. I'm really convinced of that, and we've seen the evidence. Specifically, if you look at solving big interconnected topics of our time, for example, climate change and all the rippling effects that has both on the environment, on the economics, and on the social environment that we live in. We need this inclusive thinking to happen, and we need it to come together. Economies, societies, and the environment are more closely connected to each other now than 50 years ago. So we need to apply this in our management education, is my plea. Of course, at Coca-Cola, we're not perfect in doing this and applying this. We've gone through multiple learning curves. So if you're feeling that, you're definitely not alone. Let me be the first one to call that out. We have been learning, and we will continue to learn in this space. However, we are connecting inclusive thinking into our internal strategies. We've also started by training ourselves in unconscious bias when it comes to inclusive thinking, because it really starts with that and being open to that and embrace that. We've also started looking at our governance and internal advocacy structures. Let me give you a couple of examples. For example, we have a multicultural leadership council in the US with the objective of accelerating the development and movement of multicultural talent into roles of increasing responsibility and influence. We've also created a multicultural edge leadership development program, as we call it, and as it needs to be a catalyst to strengthen our pipeline of diverse leaders and by really accelerating their career development. Another example, focusing a little bit more on the leaders of the future. This is called the Millennial Voices Leadership Council. It was created to influence decisions that further us as a leading employer of choice by igniting an entrepreneurial culture, positioning the business to meet future generations' diverse tastes and lifestyles. The Council acts as a change agent and as a Kickstarter for fresh thinking. Accomplishments here include launching the company's formal parental leave policy, on-campus recycling initiatives, so also tapping into sustainability, environmental sustainability initiatives, technology pilots, and a reverse mentoring program. So I'm just calling this out to show how we are trying to adapt ourselves, trying to apply this in our own governance. We're very proud of some of our achievements as a company and with the specific project teams that have volunteered and raised their hand to work on this. We've managed to get social justice on the agenda also in Europe, sponsored by our leadership in our region. That's very key. So again, my plea, we need our leaders and our future leaders really to embrace this. We have created a very elaborative and holistic action roadmap, as we call it, focused on making action to change. We have gathered valuable insights from external and internal sources. And also here, I would see an opportunity for management education programs to really provide those insights, to gather those insights and mold them into your curriculum, because these are the fundamentals for the managers and future learning programs. Of course, we're seeing a significant internal movement with our own employees as well. So there's a lot you can do also from internal engagement. So that could also mean something for you as organizations yourself to start working with that. And by learning and doing that, it might be easier to also apply some of that into your examples and your learnings. So that leaves me to my closing. Sustainability is the future. We all recognize that. And our future leaders need to be trained and in its know-how and the knowledge, but also in terms of the attitude, the tools and the skills that we've already heard other speakers call out that can be supported through management education. And of course, I want to leave with this for all of us. It is really about leading by example. So if we apply inclusive thinking, if we include environmental and purpose elements into our thinking, into our models, into our talks, that will be a good example to others as well. So again, thank you for having me. I was honored and happy to speak to you here today, and I really look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a great contribution. And now I understand why you insisted on this topic. Thank you very much once again. And now I would like to introduce to you Arnold Smith. Arnold Smith, I have to say there is no, it's not only well known in South Africa, where he is professor associate professor on business in society at University of Stellenbosch Business School, but he is, I don't imagine any international conference where Arnold is not invited. He is somebody who also has a big experience in leading the teams, facilitating boards and leadership teams. And he is also having an interesting function just behind him, I would say. He is immediate past president of Ethics Network of Africa. So I'm so glad we have you here with us, and the floor is yours. And you have all your time to contribute on mindset, because this was also your idea to talk about the mindset. Thank you very much, Arnold.
Thank you, Danica. It is a great privilege to be here today, and also welcome to everybody who have joined us in this session this afternoon. The dilemma of talking last is that much of what could have been said probably has been said already by the preceding speakers. So as I was listening, I realized that I had to change my approach totally and rearrange what I think that I would like to share with you this afternoon. So I'm going to take the position of the educator, because I do think that management educators hear from many, from theoretical perspectives, from practical inputs and also expectations, what they are supposed to do and how they are supposed to change and what they need to offer in order to be relevant and to be effective in terms of their role. So connecting the idea with changing mindsets, as well as at the same time deliberately taking in this conversation this afternoon the position of the educator, I think there are 4 perspectives that I would like to bring to our session here. As an educator, my relevance, and I'm certain many of yours, is embedded in terms of the society within which we find ourselves. Now, Danica has already explained to us what does it mean to be in a rising economy, the consequences thereof, the challenges that it offers, and so forth. And therefore, I do think that the first question for us to ask as educators in terms of the societies within which we find ourselves, irrespective of and inclusive of the fact that we do live in a global society with its interconnected challenges, as has already been explained to us this afternoon, means that I also need to think about what are the problems, the questions that we need to address in terms of where we find ourselves. What are the answers that we need to help develop? Also, in that sense, to connect with our own sense as educators and as human beings, with our own sense of purpose and meaning, and what makes it worthwhile for us to work at a business school. And that answer could be given from a variety of perspectives. That answer does not only sit in a CSR or in an ethics or in sustainability orientation. Some of us teach that, like myself. But that answer also needs to come from the angle of marketing, from finance, from human capital, from performance, from supply chain management, and so forth. So what is that connection point if I link what I am, who I am and what I do with the society in which I live? That's where the own mindset change, in any case, needs to be embedded in. But then at the same time, having taken notice of the fact that Danica spoke about rising economies and their particular challenges, also the approach that Mette has taken, also not just in what she said today about the PRME, but also in terms of much of what she has written before, there is also this notion that we need to get rid of the fact that, that we are business schools for business. Business schools are institutions of society. And even if you are a public business school connected to a public university, it is all the more the case that that is so. So that the purpose of the business school is to be an organ of, an institution within, and connected with many others in the society with which we find ourselves. Having said that, when I as an educator then look at the school within which I teach, it means that I would like to see a school in which these notions of purpose and meaning and value contribution to the world and to the society, that it is encapsulated in the mission and vision and values of the school. I would like to see it in the processes and the structures. I would like to feel it in the culture. The school in itself should be a living laboratory of what sustainability and responsibility and ethic means. It should not just be that we allocate that to a subject and a discipline-orientated perspective. It should be a laboratory of that in itself. It should breathe it. But then at the same time, I would like to see that business schools become convening spaces, that they become convening spaces where society in all its variety of sectors, where the leaders and the managers of society can come together and where they can together deliberate about what management is supposed to mean and do and achieve for society. As Peter Drucker has so eloquently described it as management as an organ of society. And the most important one, the most important capacity that we should be developing for 21st century societies, which I think is a vision that we would have to keep alive in this particular sense as well. Then, of course, if I say that the business school should be a convening space, it also means that we have to think differently about access. We can simply not just serve the needs of business organizations. We will have to have a much more of a broader vision. So when as an educator, when I step into the classroom, I would like to step into a classroom where I can be sure that I'm not just addressing managers and leaders from business, but I'm indeed also addressing those from civil society organizations, as well as from public sector institutions, so that we can have a collective conversation about what is needed in terms of creating a better world. At the same time, in that space where I'm in the classroom, where I do have the opportunity to work directly with a change of mindsets, it is also the case that I do not just want to see that those who are the recipients of the education, that they become good functional managers. I would also like to see that they understand what it means to be stewards of the resources of society, stewards of the resources of the environment, stewards as well of the capacities that people bring, the talent, the knowledge, the skills and experience that people bring to their organizations, whether those organizations are embedded in civil society, in business, or in the public sphere. And at the same time, I would like to see as an educator that it's not just only myself, but other colleagues have similar notions too, irrespective of the subjects that they teach, because the kind of ideals that we share here, these ideals are transversal ideas. Sustainability is a transversal topic. Responsibility is a transversal topic, and so also ethics. And it's transversal not just because of the knowledge that it carries, but because especially of the fact that it speaks to some of our most profound human capabilities, namely that we can actually respond appropriately, adequately to the challenges of our time and build the societies that we would like to long to live in. The fourth vantage point that I would like to take is that of the organization itself. Too much, I think, of the conversation in business schools is about the MBA and about educating MBAs with all the benefits that it brings for reputation and for performance and so forth. We also need to look at another kind of education, that which plays out within the organization and for organizations, executive education, and the short courses that go with that type of management education. Now, over a period of quite a number of years, I've learned that you need to understand the process. If you want to see a mindset change, with an MBA student, you can actually do this over a period of 1 or 2 years, and you can do it consistently on a day-to-day basis. But it's a different ballgame when you start talking about the same in a business environment, where people come for short courses, where you have middle and senior management development programs, executive development programs, and even programs for boards. There I have seen how over time, actually, you need to guide people, firstly, because they step into the kind of an understanding that a new vocabulary is at stake. The vocabulary of responsibility and of sustainability and ethics in the face of new liberal notions is a vocabulary that people need to learn. In my experience a few years ago, I could see that people have an idea that the vocabulary is there. But then as over the past 10 years or so, I've been working in this space, you also see how they move from vocabulary to expanding their knowledge and to have a need for a broader knowledge base around these notions. Then eventually you find yourself where you can start building skills, and eventually you can come to implementation. And the one thing, and I think this is what Therese also is calling upon us to be helpful with, is that sustainability and responsibility and ethics are those kind of notions that you need to actually cascade from the top down and across all functions of the business, so that it eventually becomes embedded in the business as a whole. I've worked with too many companies in this regard where these notions are simply the stuff that's on the agendas of sustainability officers. And nobody else really has a stake in that. So we need to learn the language and the skills of integration in that sense, because the journey for mindset change for the practicing manager is different than the journey for mindset change in comparison, for instance, with the MBA student. I would like to just close maybe by highlighting one underestimated group in this whole process. I think we need to focus on boards as well. We can drive a mindset change on a practicing management level and with MBA students, but this is a long-term investment that will mature over time to the extent that people will actually develop authority in their organizations. But boards carry an ultimate responsibility, which is relevant now. Boards are responsible for companies' sense of purpose, for their sense of accountability, for the development of an ethical culture. Once you have engaged with a director in terms of what this all means, the very next board meeting becomes the self-confrontation with what I do with this and how do I expand it within the organization. So I think this is enough said for now. And maybe as far as questions are concerned, we can address that later. But from an educator's perspective, I would like to keep society, the school itself, the classroom, as well as the organization and boardroom as the four perspectives in the context of which I would like to see the idea of the mindset change playing out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnold. Great. And now we have 20 minutes time, like we planned. I'm very happy because usually is no time anymore for the participants. So we have time, and please, Mette will lead the session, and you saw the questions already. There are many, so please start to manage this.
Thank you very much, Danica. Can I suggest that we all speakers put on your screens so we can see you and have you engaged? Thank you in the discussion here. So we have a few questions out there, and I just want to say thank you for listening in to these great presentations, very inspiring. And we have some questions out here inspired by your input and by your thinking and your reflections here initially. There is a question here from Lena Theodolides to all of us about how critical thinking skills fit to a new responsible leadership. And I think all of us have sort of talked a little bit about, you know, the need for critical thinking, the need for taking a new look at what does responsibility mean today. So maybe I will start with you, Jikyeong, and ask you what those critical thinking skills, how you see them relate to the responsible leadership that is so urgently needed.
I think that's $1 million question. It's obviously not easy, but I think the best way to do this is, I mean, you can teach critical thinking as a subject itself, but I think really need to be embedded in curriculum and really need to be embedded in ways that, you know, all our speakers mentioned. So it has to be something that we all feel that we can think about and make conscious decisions, but naturally, without actually having to think, you know, how do I deal with a particular situation this way, that way. But I think that critical analytic thinking along the line of responsible leadership, responsible management, I think needs to be embedded in every manager's, every leader's DNA, if you will.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Did you want to comment, Danica? Or?
I just wanted to say that 15 years ago, I sent a Bosnian film director to study to UK, to a university in UK, the critical thinking master. And then he was there about, you know, quite a long time, some months. And then he came back and he said to me, you know, they are exactly teaching what you are doing. So I don't need to be there, because exactly what Jikyeong said, it is Every professor should develop that. Every professor should have, explain the topics and teach people how managers, how not to be manipulators. That was the first thing he told me that they were studying there, etc. Then what is the meaning of your work, of your life? What is the, the purpose, etc. So, and how to be honest and at your work in every respect. So this is what they were studying then, but this was 15 years ago. So I think that every teacher, like you said already, should have this dimension in his own or her own teaching.
No, thank you very much, Danica. I have some really, really great questions out here, and I think I have a couple of questions that I think are alluding to the same type of discussion. So I have a great question here from Ninad Filipovic. I will just read this directly aloud. I hope, Ninad Filipovic, you will allow me to do that. So the question is, Therese has raised a number of important topics and mentioned initiatives endorsed by her company. What would she suggest to schools that do not have global presence in order to be able to join projects run by global companies such as Coca-Cola? So I think that is a very good question in this context. We're talking about a big part of the world. We've heard about 15,000 business schools in this part of the world. This is impressive. It is, impactful. But what about the local context? And this question by Ninad Filipovic is also seconded by a question by Hala Abdelgafar, saying how a more contextual adoption of responsible management education can be planned. So suggestions for how do we make sure that we are not just looking upon some of the case studies that are developed in another part of the world, for example, the United States of America, or some theorizing, some frameworks, models that are developed in another part of the world. How do we ensure that we also educate, teach models, thinking, frameworks, mindsets, if you like, Arnold, that is contextualized and appropriate for our part of the world? For this part of the world, we are talking about the rising economy is, of course, a huge area of the world, but even more local than that. Maybe I'll invite you, Therese, and then Arnold to reflect a bit on this.
Sure. So, wow, a lot of questions related to this. So maybe something that came to mind whilst you were talking, Mette, is that I think it is about training yourself in the unconscious bias. So if you start training that and include that into your curriculum and understand what the unconscious bias in your part of the world is, I'm sure that will be valuable information and will help you to develop something that is valuable for companies or projects there, because the unconscious bias in South Africa is not the same as unconscious bias in the Netherlands, where I live, or even in Denmark, which will be close. There are cultural differences. So understanding from your regional and cultural perspective what the unconscious bias is and what the gaps are that you can try to overcome, that I think will be an important key and can be of real value to the businesses operating around that. Because also in our case, like a Coca-Cola company, a lot of these social injustice conversations, obviously they happen in the US at the moment. But social injustice in Western Europe is different, not completely, but has different elements versus the US. So understanding that from a management education point of view and understanding what the specifics are for you in that region and your alumni and your future alumni, I think that is the key to success, and start working on that, because that is where the value lies and where you can differentiate from any just generic data or model. That would be my advice.
Thank you very much, Therese, for this very good input. Arnold, maybe I can turn it to you, because you were talking about a role for business schools, understanding that we are a convening space if we conquer that space. And I assume you also were thinking very much of that in a local sense. So what does that mean in terms of contextualizing and being locally aware and inclusive? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe to expand a little bit on the idea of a convening space is indeed to say that the business school should be a place where all sectors of society, managers and leaders from all sectors of society feel at home, and where they indeed find the opportunity, the space to come and develop a collective agenda, to also participate in joint problem solving and so forth. We cannot just do that through teaching alone. There's also another level of conversation that we need to have, which might play out in workshops, it might play out in conferences and so forth. And nowadays, I think in an online environment, it actually becomes so much more affordable to do that. That means, of course, at the same time, that the school should not only so much align with the ideals and the metaphors and the images of business, and from that perspective also wealth and so on, that others might feel uncomfortable and unwelcome. So what does it mean to position like that? But there is a mirror side to that as well. I think that schools should also move out. I can just maybe give an example. We have in South Africa the National Business Initiative, which is a forum consisting of about 100 companies, all very much committed to sustainable development, to the developmental agenda of the country from an economic, from a social perspective, from an environmental perspective, driving the sustainable development agenda quite purposefully forward. We as a school, in as much as we pay to belong to ABIS or to PRME or to the GRLI, some of these bodies that we belong to, we have membership of that body. Because within that collective of businesses, and in this particular case, businesses, yes, but in that collective of businesses with a common mindset and a common agenda, we actually learn what is of value and relevance to them and how we can actually, around education and research, move forward together. So I think that's an important thing. And then I think deliberately, we will have to expand also on our curriculum scope so that, and then once again, would like to say that curriculum development is a stakeholder inclusive project. So you can't go and sit and develop a curriculum around responsibility and responsible management education if you do not bring your stakeholders into the room. Whether those stakeholders are from business, whether they are from civil society and non-profit organizations, or whether they're from the public sector. So curriculum development is a stakeholder inclusive endeavor, and we need to make sure that we do that as well. So I do think, and this I would like to close with, is that our biggest challenge, I think, and risk as academics is that we become so buried under the load of academic expectations and requirements that we might also forget about the real world out there.
Yes, thank you very much about for this comment, and I think it sort of slides very well into the next question that is about lifelong learning. And this is back to you, Jikyeong. You, on one of your slides, you were actually talking about the importance of lifelong learning. And I think also Therese and Arnold, you also mentioned that we are simply not good enough as business schools to lifelong learning yet. While this is a request, we can see that also in the World Economic Forum's report, they're stressing the importance of lifelong learning, and we are not ready for that. So what could you say something more, a little bit more, Jikyeong Kang, about the challenge here, and what do we need to do as business schools?
Right. So not every school is into executive education or extension teaching and so on and so forth. But I think if you remember the days that we went through school, going to university was a big deal. So if you look at the developed countries and some of the developing countries, college education doesn't provide as much value, even postgraduate education, because we're talking about generations where we perhaps change 4 to 7 jobs. We're talking about maybe you are an investment banker, you go from company A to company B to company C and so on and so forth. And then maybe you utilize your skills in another financial industry related companies. But the future generations going through university education right now, we're talking about changing careers. 4 to 7 times in their lifetime. Some of these jobs will not have existed when they went to university or even master's degrees and whatnot. So I think teaching how to learn on their own, learning to learn, I think is one of very, very important skills. And I think, as I mentioned, multi-channel, omni-channel is very, very important. Also, having an option in terms of how we go about imparting those knowledge as well as the skills and so on and so forth is very important. So I think one silver lining of pandemic, I believe, is that all of us, not those just in the educational sector or just in the business school, I think all of us, including 80-some-year-old grandfathers to mothers and to children, teachers, I think everybody realized actually you don't always have to go to school, so to speak, or classroom to learn. There are many different ways of learning, and that can be as valuable, enjoyable, productive as possible. So I think all of us in educational sector, in higher education sector in particular, are thinking about, can we broaden our mindset and think about developing, exploring ways of teaching and allowing our learners to learn beyond the conventional outlets and alternatives that we are more comfortable with vis-a-vis classroom. I think that's one of the, perhaps a pandemic, a silver lining, and I think we just need to take that on. Another thing, if you talk to my colleagues a year ago, when you talk about hybrid learning, most of everybody would say, "Oh no, you cannot do that. It's so risky." How we teach people in a classroom versus how we teach people sitting at home, very, very different. If you mix the two, disaster. We cannot do that. But many of us didn't have any choice. I have some schools where professors choose to teach from home. There's a wonderful article recently about, end of pandemic. Some people are dreaming to go back to work. Some people are dreading to go back to work. And I think all of these things that we experience really lead to much more open-minded mentality, where what lifelong learning means and how we go about providing lifelong learning to a variety of stakeholders.
Thank you very much for this unfolding about the challenges and opportunities of lifelong learning. I have a lot of more questions out here in my chat, I'm happy to say, and I have only little time left. Danica, I want to give back to you a really good question out here, which I know that you have a strong passion for. And the question here is from Sensa Bembe, saying, I would like to hear a little more about purpose-driven leadership. And with that, I will hand over to you, Danica.
No, thank you very much. I was thinking that you make last 10 minutes the wrap up, and then I shall make a conclusion. But I can say now something too. Listening now to Jikyeong, I was thinking, you talk about learning to learn. We also have to talk about learning to unlearn. And I think that in long life, in this permanent learning, we have so much to unlearn too. And when I heard this sentence first time, I was thinking again a funny phrase, again some funny notion. But in the meantime, I really see on myself how are the things that I should unlearn, and make a possibility to learn again differently. And especially now in this COVID crisis, we see how we have to, to relearn again or unlearn and then learn. But of course, in fact, this is the same. Relearning or continuous learning and unlearning is probably just combined, So I just wanted to say that I was thinking about that listening to you. And, you also mentioned, Jikyeong, that you would, before in your speech, you mentioned the influence of social science and influence, of other professions also, of other knowledge, to integrate that in the management, not to make it only more interesting, which in fact we do, we broaden it, But I think it's more important to really to integrate the knowledge in. Like, you know, I met a French professor, Danica Purg, and he said that he would come to lecture for our last conference, CEEMAN conference, about role of biology in leadership. And then I was very surprised, you know, what can be biology? And later I saw and I talked to him recently, and he said, it's even more than what I was saying. It's even more important than I was then thinking, you know, now a year later. So what I see is now my personal, if I say something about my personal challenge, is now how to transform this learning through the high tech, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning already, that high touch, you know, that integrative learning, holistic learning, emotional learning, experiential learning, where emotions are extremely important. How to transfer all this through the high technology. How to do it, you know, without that you are touching, looking in the eyes of somebody. You still can look in the eyes, but it's not really, or tapping somebody on the shoulder or whatever. It's not really the same. And then the word meaning of work, purpose, inspiration, creativity, imagination, reflection, all this is coming to my mind, and I'm thinking that in fact, one of my biggest challenges now that we are in our school also very strong, we have to be you know, in hybrid or blended or whatever, you know, process of learning. We have to see how to make it more interesting and more, you know, how to go deeper. And I see that what we started years ago already with art, you know, how to use music, for instance, in learning process, because music can help you to become better listener. How to use painting, observing, you know, it's helping you, you know, how to, I mean, painting helps you to become better observer. How to use theater in management education, etc. It is also helping you to how to become more persuasive leader, etc. So in our school, we try with art, but there are other things with science, with sport, with other professions, you know, what I mentioned already, biology, etc. So I think that we should start to change the experience in this field and to make some efforts to make it more interesting and more, how should I say, more meaningful again, this learning process. And I think that you should talk now, Mette, to have some final words.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. So Danica asked me to sum up the conversation, and that is a daunting challenge, because there were so many great ideas, so many inspirational moments, and so much food for thought that came through my screen here for the past 1.5 hours. But I've made 9 notes, so I have 9 comments that I'm trying to summarize. I cannot guarantee that you will find everything in here, but at least for me, I think there are 9 great things to take with us from this conversation. First and foremost, the idea of systems thinking. You have all approached that from different angles, whether you talk about holistic learning or partnerships, and even the very idea of why we are here together today, the alliance. So the idea of thinking for our educational systems, whether we are in the classroom or whether we are working together across business schools, the idea of we need to do this together, the systems thinking. Second point, the call that I also heard in all conversations here, the call upon all disciplines. That we need our operation management analysts, we need our marketing professors, we need our finance professors and educators, we need all the disciplines, not just the business ethics professor to teach social responsibility and sustainability. 3, innovation. Whether we're talking about new business models or we're talking about recyclability, upscaling, downscaling, the idea of innovation, we need our students to be able to meet the world and thinking it anew. We cannot rely on former models. 4, inclusivity. Therese, that was a clear message from you. So the inclusivity in many ways, inclusive. You were talking about racial, social, but also economic inclusivity as very important for actually driving a good business. And very closely linked to that, 5, Arnold, you were talking about access, and this is also about inclusivity, you could say, but I chose to give it a special number also because the access to our educational systems is so crucial, because we also know when we look around the world that it's actually very few young people who have access to our business schools, because in many countries, if not most countries, this is very expensive, meaning this is elite. How can we do something about that? Point number 6 is about be that leader, or leading by example, as you also said, meaning you, the leader in the classroom, but also you as a school, as a business school itself, show by your own example what it means to be responsible as a school. 7 is be that convening space, invite, understand that you have the capacity, the authority to invite across different social levels, you could say, but also across different partners. You have the objectivity, you have the neutrality, you are neutral grounds, you could say. When people come and talk at a business school, they know that there is a high sort of, we call it, at least in Danish, we call it high to the ceiling. It means that you can really allow to think creatively, you can allow to think across and out of the box. And my point number 8 here is about boards. And that's about the top of the corporations, the education, the thinking about getting sustainability into the executive board, but it is also thinking about how we get sustainability into our own boards as business schools. I've been working on a board for 4 years, and it was in a school who was known to be very oriented towards sustainable development. But I saw it took me almost 1 year to have sustainable development at the same level as value creation in a good old sense as part of our vision statement. So we need to work with our own boards as well. And finally, technologies here as the point number 9. We need to understand, we need our students to be savvy tech, and they may be savvy tech from a user perspective, but they also need how to understand how they can be manipulated by tech and by the way that the algorithms work. So they need to be critical readers of the info that they get on a daily basis. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think that now I have still 1 minute to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much, Mette, Jikyeong, Therese, and Arnold for great presentations. I think that this will be on Facebook, and we were recording it, etc. So it will be available, and we can all learn from each other. The participants, thank you very much for your great comments and questions. We shall once again look at them and see what we still missed. And of course, I would like to say thank very much CEEMAN team and the IDC team, the IT guys who are always making this events great. And thank you very much to everybody. It was so nice to see you all, and also and I hope to repeat something like that, and to, of course, to see how many people participated and how many friends and how many for the first time. And one suggestion, become a members of Prime, because this is a great organization, and you can learn so much and share so much and become so much better leader and better professor, educator, if you are learning what also from others, what they are doing, and having a common purpose in your educational career. Thank you, and see you soon again, and all the best, and take care, stay healthy.